Hello, my name is Phil. I want to talk about the 20th century.
But before we do that, there is someone I'd like to mention and honor from 1864. He influenced the 20th century in an incredible way.
Just before the beginning of the 20th century, in 1864 in Geneva, Switzerland, someone called Henry Dunant, after a lot of particular events where he saw what was going on in the wars and things, Henry started the Red Cross, and also he started something called the Geneva Conventions. First of all, it was called the Geneva Conventions, then later it was finally called the Geneva Convention. This was a way to treat the prisoners well and treat people well. The first event that we're talking about are the Boer Wars. Now, the Boer Wars were also called the Wars of Independence and also called the Anglo-Boer Wars. The first Boer War was from 1880 to 1881, but the second Boer War was from 1899 to 1902. The second war is also known as the South Africa War. These wars were between the British and the Boers, and the Boers were the descendants of the Dutch people living in South Africa. Some people in England were very sad and angry about the fact that the British were keeping people in concentration camps, and they came over to inspect those camps. They tried to help. We can also see that certain techniques that were used in the Boer War were later used in the First World War. And we can also see that some people in the Boer War also went on to play an active role in the First World War and in the Second World War. Now, from 1898 to 1900, there was also a war called the Boxer Rebellion in China. The Chinese tried to expel and kill foreigners living in China, and then 8 nations joined together to protect the foreigners. This led to an invasion and an attack. The 8-nation alliance was formed by about 45,000 troops from the German Empire, Japan, Russia, Britain, France, the USA, Italy and the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. From the 17th of October 1899 to the 21st of November 1902, there was the 1,000-day war in Colombia. It primarily was a civil war, but neighboring nations helped the factions inside Colombia. In the end, Panama became independent of Colombia, being protected by the USA. From 1899 to 1902, there was the Philippine-American War. This was a continuation in some ways of the Spanish-American War, which itself was an extension of the Cuban War of Independence. As you can see, sometimes wars start off with one name and then they carry on with another name. In 1900, Hawaii officially became US territory. 22nd of January 1901 or 1901, Queen Victoria died. Queen Victoria was Queen of the British Empire. Her eldest son, Edward VII, became King of the United Kingdom. Also, in 1901, the first Nobel Prize was given. One of those prizes was given to Henry Dunant, the one who founded the Red Cross and the one who helped found the Geneva Conventions, which was later known as the Geneva Convention. 2 years later, on the 17th of December 1903, there was the first flight in an aeroplane by the Wright brothers. Their names were Orville and Wilbur Wright. Then, from the 8th of February 1904 to the 5th of September 1905, there was the Russian-Japanese War. On the 8th of April 1904, Britain and France signed a treaty not to have any more wars between them. On the 4th of May 1904, Frederick Henry Royce and Charles Stuart Rolls got together to form a motor car company. In 1906, they produced the Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. From 1904 to 1908, there was the first official genocide in the 20th century carried out by the German Empire. Thousands of people died from starvation and dehydration in the Namib Desert. It was called genocide because those people had been forced into the desert and they couldn't escape and they died there. In 2004, Germany expressed grief for what had happened. 1905 saw the publication of Albert Einstein's theory of special relativity. In 1905, Norway became independent. From the 22nd of January 1905 to the 16th of June 1907, it started on what is known as Bloody Sunday. Now, this is the Russian Bloody Sunday, not the Irish Bloody Sunday, which happened later. On the 18th of April 1906, there was a huge earthquake in San Francisco. Up to about 3,000 people died. On the 12th of August 1908, Ford launched the Ford Model T car. A few years ago, the Model T car was named Car of the 20th Century. On the 6th of April 1909, the geographical North Pole was reached by the American Robert Edwin Peary and his team. He had tried 5 times over a period of 7 years to reach it. On the 25th of July 1909, the Frenchman Louis Blériot, I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly or not, was the first one to cross the English Channel from France to England. Now, he landed in the grounds of Dover Castle. He won a prize of 1,000 UK pounds, which was given to him by the Daily Mail for being the first one to cross the English Channel. On the 6th of May 1910, the English King Edward VII died. His son George took over. However, it wasn't until the 22nd of June 1911 that he became George V. On the 14th of December 1911, the South Pole was reached. There were two teams racing to the South Pole. One was from Britain and the other one was from Norway. The team from Britain was being led by Robert Falcon Scott, but the other team was being led by Roald Amundsen from Norway. Scott used donkeys to try to reach the South Pole, but Amundsen only used husky dogs. The first one to reach it was Amundsen. When Amundsen reached the South Pole, he left Scott a letter and some food for his men. Now, there are some very sad events which happened after that. He had reached the South Pole 5 weeks after Amundsen on the 17th of January 1912. When he went back to his base camp, the conditions were so bad that he and all his team died. Now, at the South Pole, there is the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station in honor of the two explorers. You probably know 1912 because of a very famous ship which sank called the Titanic. It sank on the 14th of April 1912 and more than 1,500 people died. A lot of measures were taken after that. There had to be a Morse code operator 24 hours a day on ships. On the 28th of June 1914, someone called Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were traveling in an open car in a place called Sarajevo, Serbia. They were shot and eventually Archduke Ferdinand died. On the 28th of July 1914, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia. On the 1st of August 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. On the 3rd of August 1914, Germany declared war on France. Then, on the 4th of August 1914, the next day, Britain declared war on Germany. This war has many names. It was called the First World War, World War I, the Great War. Millions of people died in this war, which was mainly fought in France. However, a very unusual thing happened in the war. On the 24th of December 1914, Christmas Eve, the Germans and the British, who were fighting each other, stopped fighting each other and they started singing carols. They shouted to each other, "Don't shoot, we'll come out." They play football. I think there were at least 3 or 4 football matches. It's called the Christmas truce. Everybody expected the war to have finished by Christmas 1914. In fact, it didn't. It went on until 1918. On the 7th of May 1915, a German submarine called the Uboat fired 1 or 2 torpedoes and sunk a ship, and 1,198 people died. 761 people survived. On the 24th of April 1915, the Turks started killing the Armenians in Armenia. This carried on until 1923. This eventually became known as the Armenian Genocide. On the 1st of July 1916 to the 13th of November of the same year, there was a series of battles in France called the Battles of the Somme River. The consequence of this was that the Allied troops gained about 5 miles or 8 kilometers into the German territory. A total of about 1.3 million people on both sides lost their lives. As a result of this, the British and the French went on to win the First World War. The 7th of November 1917 saw the Russian Revolution, where the Russian government was taken over. This was the start of the Russian Civil War, which went on till 1922 and went on till 1923 in some places. Vladimir Lenin and his Red Army went on to take control of Russia, which was later called the Soviet Union. This was part of the October Revolution. Tsar Nicholas II and his family were killed around July 1918. At 11 o'clock on the 11th of November 1918, in a train in northern France, the First World War came to an end with an armistice. The Germans surrendered to the British and the French Allied troops. On the 28th of June 1919, exactly 5 years to the day after the First World War started, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. This treaty exclaimed that Germany was guilty and had to pay for the war. However, peace didn't last very long. Somebody talking about the Treaty of Versailles said it's going to last about 20 years. Exactly that. 20 years later, we had the Second World War. In 1919, after the First World War finished, something terrible happened in the world. It is what is now known as the Spanish flu. Although, to be honest, it didn't start in Spain. It probably started in France or Germany after the terrible conditions of the First World War. They say more people were killed with the Spanish flu than in the First World War. And estimates have been put 20 or 50 or even 100 million people. Nobody really knows how many people died because of the Spanish flu. On the 10th of January 1920, 17 nations came together to form the League of Nations. Later, that League of Nations would become the United Nations.